All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to your final day of Round Rock ISD Virtual Band Camp. Hope everybody was able to learn at least a little something every single day, and we are certainly looking forward to starting virtual school with you in just a few days. We are going to end our camp with an just amazing guest speaker who's going to, I think, give you some insightful thoughts about how the realm of judging works within DCI and BOA. Mr. Scott Koter is here this morning. He was inducted into the DCI Hall of Fame just a few years ago. He has just made DCI and the marching arts kind of what it is today, if I'm being honest. Well, seriously, between the Cavaliers and just everything has been. With the Cedar Ridge kids the other day, we were watching the 2002 Cavaliers, and it was just like, that was my first time to actually see DCI in person, and it was just like, I didn't know that marching band could be that, you know. Anyway, I'm gonna digress because I'm being a fan club person over here. But anyway, so I'm gonna pass it along to Mr. Koter. Let me make you the host, and he's gonna share his screen, and we will be off to the races on this very informative talk. It'll be a lot of fun. Thank you for being here with us today. And you should be a host now.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Can you see that okay, Mr. Peterson? Can you see the first slide?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay, let's try it again.
Okay.
How about now?
It's not sharing the screen for some reason.
Okay. Sorry, everybody. I guess
You're good.
Okay, I see I'm the host, but yes, no?
No, just you still.
You want to share it and unshare it maybe, or something like that?
Or
what do
well,
you
with you being the host, are you clicking on that share screen button?
Yeah. Oh, I got you. I'm here you go. There we go.
There it is. There you go.
Sorry about that, everybody.
Oh, you're good.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. Welcome, Cedar Ridge Band and Round Rock School District. Last year, I maybe freshmen don't know, but I was able to spend a day with Cedar Ridge and was just had a great time. I was blown away with the show, but more importantly, how hard the band worked and what you were able to accomplish in that day. So I'm honored to be here. So today, just going to have some fun and do a little judging ourselves. So the first thing I want you to do, I'm going to show you 3 short videos, and you're going to rank them. You can rate them. It doesn't matter. It means give them a score. But basically, all we want you to do is just rank them 1, 2, 3 after you watch the 3. Okay? All right. So here we go. This is performance 1. Okay, number 2. Okay, and number 3. All righty, and I'll just put this photo up here for you. Mr. Peterson shared that Google form with you, and just rank them. Which one do you like the best? Which one second, third?
And also, all your students, you should have gotten a text from me with that Google form. I actually didn't put it in the chat, but you should have gotten it on your phone. So hopefully that's pretty easy to access. Okay. Yeah, I see them coming in right now. We have 7 responses so far. So
okay. While you're doing that, you know, obviously when you're watching, there's lots of things. No doubt each one of these performers is really proficient, almost, we use the term like a virtuoso, really special, kind of unique in their own right, for sure. You know, other things that might be affecting you is, you know, your experience with any of these instruments or like instruments, the look of the performer, the age. There's a lot of things that go into this, you know. And I didn't give you a lot of guidelines for ranking these, which is fine, and that'll be the point of discussion, right? Okay, so why don't we just for the sake of moving on there, give me a rough idea here, Mr. Peterson, what your class like so far?
Sure. So let's see. First place so far. First place is video 3, the guy with the glasses at the end. And second place would be the first video, and then third place would be the second video, the straw.
Right. Yeah. That's sort of what I expected. You know, obviously there's things that, you know, even without guidelines, all of you are accomplished and made it to, you know, at least 9th grade through. And so you have experience with performing and the idea of judging. So, you know, the uniqueness of the instrument, the performer, you know, maybe you've been to been at a dinner where you've tried to play glasses. Obviously the number one, he's in that video, I believe he's only 6 or 7 years old. It's a ukulele, there's only 4 strings. The straw is interesting. It got a little monotonous, which is probably why, but great vibrato and technique, things like that. The performance order, that may have had something to do with it. There's all kind of variables. The difficulty, and all are difficult. Probably if we had you all try one of those 3 things, the hardest thing may have been to get that sound on the straw, but you know, in your background, bassoon players, double reed players might have a different idea of what's hard compared to, you know, the ukulele and things like that. So anyhow, and then, you know, your own background biases, which we'll talk about later. Background is what you prefer, what you have experience with, right? Okay, so real quick, this is just an overview but these are the things we're going to accomplish today. Going to look a little bit deeper at judging terms and the process of judging. We're going to talk about criteria used to establish ratings. That's assigning a score, and rankings, that's the place order. Okay, and criteria, that's the scale. Your teachers probably use the word rubric a lot. How are we going to be graded? So that's what we mean by that. You've heard the term effect or general effect. That's sort of unclear to a lot of people, including your parents. And myth, which is a misconception or a fallacy or something that we think is true but ends up not being true, okay, in terms of what judges look for, okay? So just some basic graphs here, some charts just to help you understand. Obviously, marching band judging, we look at the music and visual, and some things overlap. Notice that the music, and this is mostly in a BOA or a similar type judging system, music is worth more points, so it's weighted a little bit more. The overlap there is obviously what somebody is doing visually while they're playing is very important and a consideration, and obviously what we see in terms of communication versus what we're playing is also a consideration. So that's a big overview. Okay, there are 2 music performance judges. That's accuracy. That's the actual nuts and bolts. One person on the field checking out individuals and small groups in like areas. Then one person that's in the press box or as high up as they can go, that's listening and considering everything all. Why they're overlapping? Obviously, there are things, whether you're up close to a musician or far away, precision, tone quality, intonation, blend, all those things are considered, okay? So again, I know you understand all this, but maybe for some freshmen or people new, but this pie graph may be helpful for you if you share it with your parents. Visual performance, same thing. There's somebody on the field moving around, checking out individuals, small groups, and common areas, while there's somebody upstairs, okay? So, but looking at the same thing, in some, what do you required to do visually while you're playing and or spinning, if you're for color guard or dancing, and of course, basic things like timing, technique, expression, those type of things. Okay. All right. This is a thing that I think is really important. Okay. And most judging system for art in general, but in particular pageantry, in this case, the BOA system, is what we call build-up system. So I often hear parents talk about, oh my gosh, I saw a rifle drop, or that student, his plume came off, or I missed a step off, or whatever, and think those are all things that are going to impact the score. And although maybe they can indirectly, everybody needs to know that you start with 0, and the more things that you get right or accomplish or achieve, the more points you get. And if you look at this scale, that's a scale or a range, and then rarely would be poor, and frequently would be fair, sometimes would be good, usually would be excellent, and probably always would be superior or something like that. So it's a basic rubric. Don't want to really assign a letter to it, A, B, C, D, or E, but it's that same thing. There was a time though, decades ago, where pageantry judging was a teardown system, where everybody started with 100, and there were judges walking around with clipboards, and when they'd see a mistake, they'd actually put a mark, or they called it a tick, and then they would subtract that. And when I started in drum and bugle corps, and in high school marching band judging, there were people doing that. They were not talking on tape recorders. They were simply just marking down, and that's left over from the military, inspections, things like that. Think of it as a demerit. Okay, so this is a really important formula, and I'll give you a couple things to think about here. But in any performance caption, or even the effect, but it's achievement. It's what you were able to accomplish. But there's a formula to it. It's not just how well you played or how well you marched, okay? It's another consideration has to be what you're being asked to do, visually or musically or both, while you're doing what you're doing. Okay, so it's a basic algebraic formula, content or what, which I guess I could have put W there, but plus the execution, which is how, or the precision, equal your achievement number, or your final, your bottom number at the bottom of the sheet. Okay, so I think everybody on here has experienced some concert band contest judging, okay, where you go for a rating. And depending on what period you have it and your experience level, you may be in a band that plays grade 5 or 6, and some of you may be in 6th, 7th, 8th grade. We're in a band and performed at a grade 1 level. The beauty there is the fact that if you're playing grade 2, you can still achieve a 1. You're not being compared to a group playing grade 6, made up of all senior, all state players. It's just what you're expected to do, which is great. And there are classifications in marching band often, but in this case, when you really have to rank and rate people, and I'm sure you considered it when you thought about difficulty in those videos, you also have to consider what the person is doing. In other words, if you have to play fast notes, a fast run, let's say 16th notes or triplets at a very fast tempo, that's difficult. But if you had to do it on the move at that tempo, okay, would that make it more difficult? Or if you had to be socially distanced 6 feet or more and play together, something that was really syncopated, which, rhythmically difficult, that would be consideration. And all the judges are trained and have experience and are looking for that. So I think it's important. It's not just how well you play. There has to be also some analysis on the part of the person that's just judging to consider that. That's hard for your parents, especially ones that don't really have a lot of background in this. My son was a competitive diver and dove all the way through college, and there they had a degree of difficulty. So judges would just sit, the dive would be completed, they'd hold up the number 1 through 10 or 7.5, 5 or whatever. But the math part of that was the degree of difficulty. Well, we don't have that necessarily. That's a little bit more left up to the judge, okay? All right, that's about the most talking I'm going to do. Now, to get us into visual, I want you now to judge or rank these paintings on effectiveness to you. Again, no criteria, no rubric, you're just gonna look at these 3 paintings. And we're not doing this with judging. We're just going to do this mentally. Mr. Peterson didn't share a form, but the same idea. So here we go. All right. I'll just let you look at this, get a feel for it. Okay, this is number 2. And this is number 3. And I'll put them all up there for you to just make that mental note. Again, I didn't give you any criteria or any basis for how to score this. If I would have said, let's just do this based on how vivid the color is, the negative part of this is you can't see them at a gallery on the wall. But I think you get an idea. So, in terms of decisions, when I've done this with some other smaller groups and things like that, the ranking usually turns out 3, 1, 2. So maybe just a show of hands to Mr. Peterson, if you can raise your hand or whatever. Can you do that, Mr. Peterson? How many people got that ranking? 3, 1, 2. Or any comments?
It's hard for me to see that many kids.
Okay. But some of the things that might affected your ranking were just your traction, the color, the brush technique, some other things. your own background, your own biases, perhaps even what fruit you like, who knows, okay? Familiarity with the paintings or artists, okay? Make sure you share with Mr. Peterson. I'll check in with him if anybody knows any of these, okay? I'm gonna give you a little insight into these second, okay? So you may or may not have heard of these, but there's Monet, obviously, the number one, French Impressionistic, born about 1840, died 1926. All these three painters lived about the same time. The next one is Vincent van Gogh. We know him as in Dutch, they actually say Van Gogh, but I think we know that name, okay? And the last one is Prentice. Van Gogh obviously lived around the same time. He's considered post-impressionistic, but around that same time period. And Prentice is an American painter, okay? Considered an illusionist, all right? And if I would have shown you these ahead of time, it may have had an effect on you. There is a myth that, how good a band has been affects what judges think of them. And hopefully that's not the case, but who knows, okay? So we're gonna look at the overall judging system now. We looked at performance before. There are 7 total judges, and the thing I want you to look at now is the word effect in the middle. In the Bands America system, there are 2 music effect judges, and that score is averaged together, weighted a little bit more, and 1 visual effect judge, okay? Along with the 4 performance judges, okay? More importantly, on either of the effect sheets, and I'm gonna show you one here in a second, there are 2 subcaptions or categories, okay? The effectiveness of the repertoire, that's the written program, okay? And then the performance effectiveness. So in this case, it's you, the performers, what the band demonstrates, and then what overall, it's the written program, and it's sort of like the what and the how. And then obviously performance is the communication of that, okay? So I put up here, again, most of you have seen these just as a refresher. So this is the visual effect sheet. You see that scaled on there, that rubric, once again. That's just a reminder there, okay? And you see the categories. Now, see those bullets? Those are considerations, but those aren't a checklist. There are so many, there's an infinite amount of things that actually can be considered in there. But that's a good reminder, just a kind of a trigger point for the judges, okay? But some important things. And you, the performers especially, is, sometimes, we don't always get to choose what we're performing on a concert or on the football field, but you still have a big responsibility to bring it life. But see, there's much more than how accurate it is, okay? Yeah, artistry is that, or professionalism, but how about the communication? There are times that you're really into it. The band, you get that feeling, man, this feels good, and it's very emotional. And there are times that the audience gets that. There are times the audience gets it, and you may think, oh, I made a mistake, or this wasn't our best performance. But so you never know, okay? So this is the back of the sheet. And again, there's that scale, and you see to what degree the band demonstrates and to what degree the performer demonstrates, right? There's a word that I think is important, and it's called coordination. I guess if we go back here, sorry about that. Let me go back one. You see the second bullet there. Coordination means, are we seeing what we're hearing? Is the visual program making the music come to life? And that would be no different than your favorite, video you've seen of your favorite audience. On Disney Plus the other day, I watched the Beyonce movie on there. I forget what it's called. Black is King, I believe. Unbelievable costuming, unbelievable music, unbelievable choreography. So coordination is a big word. I think that's something, it's not the only thing. And then obviously guard or drill team, or, whatever, you have dancers, though that's what elevates. And a lot of times when you're watching and listening, that's the guard or the dancers are the main characters, and the band's the supporting cast. I can't say all the time, but a big point of the time. They make the music come to life. Those are things that are really a big consideration in effect judging, okay? But just in wrapping this effect thing up, okay, it is important you understand it's the communication, it's the emotion. You can be really precise and it not be real stimulating, okay? And I'm going to show you some things later on to illustrate that point. You may have heard this term, or you might have heard your parents talk about this a little bit. Well, it's so subjective. It's judges, they like this style, or they want to hear the latest, the best wind ensemble literature, or this person likes John Philip Sousa and they don't like Jay-Z, or whatever. And judges obviously are selected, chosen, and trained to championing or to react to all styles. So when you're objective to something, when you're looking at things, and most of you are probably objective to all these things today because you didn't know any of them, I think it's important to understand it. You're not influenced by personal feelings or opinions, considering and representing facts. You can independently, without the word bias, which means a liking to or connection to, do your job, which is to rank and rate. Now, subjective is the opposite, obviously. Okay, and that's not what judging is. Even effect, because some people say, well, effect is where it's at. That's where bands really win. And if the judge liked that style, or they're playing a song that judge did with a drum corps, or whatever, those things you can't judge, and they don't select judges. And judges can never have their personal preference enter in. Okay. And so it's not based on any personal feelings or taste. Okay. So that's something too, when you're talking to your parents or friends, or you're talking hopefully soon, if not this year, next year, talking about, what the judge's reactions were. I oftentimes hear, Mr. McGillicuddy in math class yelled at me. He doesn't like me. Well, hopefully the word like doesn't enter into it. Did it warrant having somebody redirect you? And usually a redirection or telling you can do something better for young adults is interpreted as, well, they don't like me, okay? But when you're talking to your parents, I think it's important to understand that the entire system of judging, including effect, the communication, is in fact objective, okay? I talked about this a little bit. So I was a judge administrator for Drum Corps International before I became a designer. And that's where I learned to be an administrator, which is what I did my last years, being a principal and assistant superintendent. But you hire people and you put people in the roles based on sort of their personality and their skills, okay? And everybody's well trained, but when somebody's assigned to effect judging, okay, they're gonna have a vast knowledge of their subject matter. In this case, music and band and styles, and they're going to have some experience as a director probably, or a staff member, and a designer of some sort. They're going to have that. They're going to be lifelong learners, of course. They have to be open-minded and reactionary. We use a term in judging. Judges on any given night, band A can beat band B depending on the performance, okay? Especially in the effect captions, okay? Because I talked a little bit about in performance where, can Mary had a little lamb on 3 notes beat, Persichetti's symphony? I don't want to get into a debate, but there are factors they have to consider with content. And here's the thing, guys, on effect, difficulty can be an effect, but that doesn't mean it is, okay, all the time. All right. Judges for effect have to be spontaneous in the moment. So if you think about hanging out with your friends, who's that crazy person that sometimes just say, I want to do this, or I want to taste this, or I want to go here. Sometimes those are the best, like the crazy. You may have known this, our brain has dominance, and right brain is creative and left brain is a little bit more analytical, more organized. And we all have brain strengths, but depending on how we're made up, our genetics, some of us might be a little bit more mathematic and logical, whereas other people can't ever find their keys, but yet they can take a piece of clay and sculpt something, And I'm not saying all judges can be sculptors or composers, but they have some of those elements. And the biggest thing is able to watch and listen at the same time, the marriage of that. Okay, that's what effect judges have. And if your music effect, yes, it's weighted in music, but you're watching. And if the visual portrayal and the guard and all those things help elevate the music, then it's a win-win. Okay, all right, you guys are going to judge again. You ready? All right, you're going to rank these 3 drawings, and you can use that visual effect if you have it up. It's not, don't worry about it again. Just put them in order, 1, 2, 3, based on your preference. Okay, here we go. Number 1. The longer you look, sometimes the more things that you see or pop out. And then sometimes, to be honest with you, the more things that stick out is, oh, I'm not sure about that. Number 2. And of course, number 3. And here they are again as a reminder. So in your mind, just put your ranking. Which one appeals to you most? Second and third. Feel free to share those with Mr. Peterson. These are obviously different than the paintings I showed you, which were all famous paintings, okay? These are young drawings, colorings, as a matter of fact, okay? And I hate to say that high school marching band would be equivalent of this versus, let's say, professional groups and those paintings, but I will say for judges that are highly skilled and highly trained, with a lot of experience, sometimes ranking and rating the band's performance is, I don't want to say is easy, but is as clear as ranking these 3 paintings. Okay, let's talk about your decisions. What factors, affected this ranking? Was it the execution? Did they stay in the lines? Because it looked like everybody tried to stay in the lines. Did they go the same direction with the coloring? Was it their color choices? Was it the most accurate execution of that painting or drawing, I should say, rather than performance? Was it the most effective? So if I go back here, do you have any feeling from the class, Mr. Peterson, what they liked?
All right, so hey, hold up your finger, 1, 2, or 3. Which one is your favorite? Let me switch my screen here real quick. Hold to where I can actually see you. Some of y'all are down here. I see a lot of 2s.
Okay.
And a few 3s.
Okay. A lot of 2s, 3s, not a lot of 1s then, right?
Correct.
Okay, so if we go back and talk about the decisions, I'm wondering if 2 was the cleanest, it was the most accurate and stayed in the lines. Why don't you just give Mr. Peterson, if you're still looking, Mr. Peterson, give a thumbs up to him if that was why you chose number 2, because it was the best executed. Is that a thumbs up for that? We getting anybody on that one?
Give me a temperature check. Thumbs up, thumbs down if you pick number 2. It's because it was cleanest. Lots of thumbs up, and then a few, kind of. So yeah.
Is that why? Okay.
Yep, sounds like it.
Yeah, depending on the group. I did this yesterday with Mr. Peterson, and I did this with my my family last night. And although they all agree that number 2 was the cleanest, they seem to be attracted to number 3, which is the one I'm attracted to. It just was more effective. So it depends on that. There's no right or wrong, by the way, in this. Okay.
You had some kids like celebrating when you said number 3.
Okay. Yeah, there's no right or wrong. But here's the big thing. The cleanest, and this is what you have to explain to your parents. the most precise, the cleanest, the most together, whatever word you want to use, that performance is not always the winner. It's not even always the winner within a caption that's supposed to be just strictly performance, because if you can do a clean performance and make someone feel something about the music and communicate something, that's even more. So in this case, I already told you there's 7 judges. Each judge has these subcaptions, 2 subcaptions. They rank and rate those individually to get their bottom score, the total score. Then you take those scores and either add them together or average them, depending, and we get a bottom line score out of 100, right? In this case, if you look at the rankings, which we call ordinals, and I think UIL definitely does it this way, where the judges, you'll see on the recap or summary that, somebody will have they add the numbers together because you had a 1, a 2, a 3, but you might have an outlier that has an 8. And you could say, well, that judge is wrong. But what if, let's say your percussion section happened to be all freshmen and half of them, and this is just an example, and Cedar Ridge has, arguably the best percussion in the country. But there could be a band that has percussion that's either they all switch from double reeds or all freshmen, they're not quite experienced, and that's where they got the 8th place, okay? And so the sum is greater, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, which is an old expression, meaning that's where the system takes place with that. But I think it's important that something can be effective without it being exactly precise. On the other hand, something can be really glitzy and appealing. We're going to talk about that in a second, but yet presented not real professionally, and therefore not score as well. See, when your parents watch, they're looking at all the things that, and a lot of times parents are watching sort of looking at their phone or reading on their Kindle or knitting. I always like watching grandmas, and you can tell because grandmas will wear whatever school shirt they have and things like that. And they're not, let's look up. But what I think a great band does in terms of communication is they get the grandmas of the bands that you're competing with to look up. Okay. And occasionally, especially if I wasn't judging, I'd ask a grandma, and I'm saying a grandma, but a relative or, somebody there cheer on another group. Why did you like that group? Or why did you think they're effective? And sometimes they say, I'm not sure. I just couldn't stop watching, which would be, or I couldn't stop listening. Or they might say, well, it's because they had really a lot of props out there, or they were really loud, or they were really large, and all, we'll talk about that in a second. Okay. And which leads me to, the last thing. And whether it's in clinic situations or just actually overhearing parents, what I've been judging, or at contests, just watching or waiting for my own groups to come on, this is the biggest thing you always hear. All the shows are so different. How the judges choose between apples and oranges. And that's an old saying, because one thing is so different than another, which is why I've used a lot of fruit in today's presentation. So, and the answer to this comes from a friend I made 30, 40 years ago. That is a famous judge administrator, DCI Hall of Famer himself, where, and I hate to read this, but judges are not always comparing to apples to oranges. Okay. They're just ranking and rating fruit. And their job, a judge's job on any given night within their caption, which is effect or on whatever sheet they're using, is to determine if band A's performance of their chosen banana is more effective than band B's performance of their watermelon. Okay. And when I say effective, that means effective in communication, effective in performance, and things line up. So, okay. So that's a really key point, but here's a better way of saying it. And I like food, obviously, and the best barbecue, Mr. Peterson and the Cedar Ridge band staff took me to, was it Mueller's? Right, in Taylor, Texas last year, that's not the best barbecue I've ever had, being from Western Pennsylvania. So I like to eat a lot of food. So here, I've already talked to you about the word biased and the subjective, which means you like, or you're attracted to, or you have experience with. And I use I compared and contrasted objective versus subjective. Judges don't get to choose what they get to eat. They just get to say how good it tastes, how well it's presented, and most often judges will tell you how to make it better in the future. Okay, so they're not ranking and rating fruit. So if Cedar Ridge or Round Rock, any of the unbelievable RRISD bands, come out there, and they choose to do a show that happens to be all Elton John, and they're competing against a group that has to be playing all, let's say, all John Mackey or all Percy Granger. Maybe some of you know those things, or Robert W. Smith, fill in the blank. They're not saying one composer is better than the other. See, nobody would ever rank Monet and Van Gogh and say which one was better. They were both phenomenal painters, okay? But unfortunately, we do have to compete and rank and rate. So in this case, there are variables. So it's really important that as much as we like to think judges have biases and it's subjective, it's not. Now, I can't say, guys, with good faith that occasionally in my career, especially as a teacher and designer, where I think there was a judge that maybe didn't quite have the background experience with the style. But that happens once in a blue moon, so to speak, okay? So again, I think you share this with your parents. I think it'll be important, okay? So these are other common misconceptions about judging, okay, that you can talk to your parents about or talk to your friends or the directors about. Bands must utilize expensive props, costuming, flags to score well. Okay, and that's a myth or misconception or a fallacy, or it's just not true, however you want to say it. When a judge is in that seat or standing with that sheet, with that task of doing that, their responsibility is to react what the groups deliver with no preconceived notion of what is used to communicate their program. That's really important. Here's what happens, and this is something I really stress with directors. Directors sometimes look at groups at other contests or in past years that were successful and think that's what judges prefer. And that's a fallacy or a myth, okay? And here's the best way to dispel or to disprove about this expensive prop and costuming. A lot of you on here have heard of a band called Ronald Reagan High School from San Antonio, and they won the Bands of America San Antonio Regional last year, I believe, right? They also, I think in a contest, I think at your contest, bested Vandergrift, right? Who ended up going to BOA Nationals, who won Bands of America Grand Nationals last year, right? Most people didn't notice this, and I didn't the couple times I judged Reagan, but they had no props, zero, none. So that's a great example of they were just so darn effective and they performed at such a high level. They chose not to have props and they were able to do it swimmingly, okay? And that's the same way if you go to Broadway, and I hope we can go to Broadway at some point. Revivals are when they'll do a show together, and there was on Broadway until it shut down, a revival of West Side Story that was used really with no set at all, or very little set, but all video cameras. So it's a new setting of that, okay? So I guess my point is this: you have to be open to anything, and how you choose to present it is up to you and your staff and directors, okay? Just remember, the judging system rewards the groups based on achievement, and they remain open. Here's another misconception. Small bands cannot achieve on the same level as large bands. That's not true. As a matter of fact, I want everybody to think, in whatever experience, whether it be color guard, dance, cheerleading, gymnastics, and of course playing your instrument on any level, whether it be in a small ensemble or a duet or in a 100-piece concert band or whatever, the idea is to sound as one band, right? One ensemble, one blend, prioritize the melody, or intonation, flawless intonation, or execution and clarity. So in this case, if we're all trying to sound like one anyhow, a large band, if they can do it, could that be worth a little bit more, a few more points? Maybe on some performance captions, but not from the effect. What matters most is just communication, okay? Adjudicators react to what's delivered. well before you were born, one of the first times I judged after I became administrator, but I judged Bands of America Grand National Finals. And there was a band from Mississippi that had a total of 30. And they were in their class, but for finals there, you can, if your score is one of the top 12 highest, you still make finals. And that's the way it is a lot of contests. And there was a phenomenal band from Texas that I want to say had 400 that was in there. And I was judging effect. And I'll tell you what, I almost wasn't able to judge the next band, because when it came time to rank and rate and compare those bands, and they were both phenomenal, which one is effective, that was a tough decision. I actually had the band with 30 players, 30 performers that did it on a tarp, sort of like an indoor drum line or indoor guard, because it was, once I played all the factors, it was, for what they were doing, it was more effective than what the other group was doing. That's just an example of when that system happens, okay? And again, it's the same answer to everything. Judges have to be open, and on any given night, anything can work. All right. And I think this is the last ones. And I've already talked about this. The groups that place highest set the standard for what judges expect others to follow. That's a fallacy. Okay. Listen, I had you rank three video performances, which were interesting. Some were more interesting than others, but there's an infinite number of interesting performers out there if we'd find them. I had you do 3 children colorings. Okay. Probably none of those are things that you would pay $50,000 for if you could, okay? And a lot of you, if you were billionaires, you may not even want to have an original Monet or Van Gogh or Prentice, so it really doesn't matter. But the bottom line is a system, and it's the task of the judges based on that system, okay, to just rank and rate within it. Actually, and too often, like I made a mention of, Reagan didn't use any props. So there could be people saying, well, Reagan didn't use props next year, so we're not going to use props. But we're going to do a show called The Throne. Like last year, I think Cedar Ridge's show had to do with chess, right? So could you imagine, I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't have been done, but it would have been more difficult, because you had a person acting as a king and a queen last year, right, in that band, and used chess pieces. But could you imagine if you were doing that this year and you had the opportunity, and the staff said, well, Reagan didn't use props last year, so we can't use props, but we're going to do a show about chess and tell a story about a chess game. That really wouldn't be sense. And that's a prime example. If you have to do what's right for the show, for the performers you have, for the skills and experience, the resources, and for your show theme, okay? But judges don't expect anything except for everybody comes out with an open book, a blank slate, so to speak, okay? And it's what you do with it, all right? So don't think that you have to do, it's like that, research says that we like a lot of musical artists, often based on what they wear or what they look like, and that's why we're attracted. There have been people that said 75% of what you see is what you hear. We're attracted to that type of stuff. So in this case, a lot of times, especially as young adults, we're saying, okay, well, this is in style. We're going to do this, or I like the way this person looks. I'm going to get it. That's fine, okay. But there also is something to be said for being comfortable and being able, like saying, this is what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. Okay. Because we want to promote individuals as performers and individual bands. Okay. And that was fast, but that's what I got. So hopefully that helps. And I can share the screen back with you, Mr. Or, if people have questions, we can do that. If not, you guys can celebrate your last day of virtual band camp.
We have just a few minutes. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask as far as, everything that we've covered? For me, I think that, you hit the nail on the head. I've only gotten to judge once. It was last year. I judged area in Midland, and I ran into the same issue that you were kind of talking about. There was one band that was, I think, 12 kids total, right? but I was a marching judge, and I ranked that band about halfway. Like I think I watched 30 bands in prelims. I think I had them pegged around in the middle, right? Because those couple of kids that were out there on the field were marching better than all the other, like, you know. So I think that your presentation definitely hit a bunch of the myths that are out there and debunks them.
Right. Good. Any questions? Any thoughts?
They're speechless.
That's fine. I understand.
Yep.
And the band camp. Well, thank you for the opportunity. I enjoyed. Hopefully, I get to see everybody in person here in the near future. Yep. I love my time at Cedar Ridge. Great people, great teachers. And I came in. I think it was like the first week in October, right? Last year.
I believe so.
Yeah, and then I watched you guys, and again, freshmen weren't there, but I watched the band, the prelims performance. And I went back and watched the video. Unbelievable, just unbelievable. I won't say improvement, but obviously it was improved. But as much it was improved from a performance standpoint, just the communication, the ability to understand what the show was about, and there are a lot of things, including contest dynamics, which is where you go on in the show. And I'm not saying that being on early out of, was there 90 bands or 80 bands last year in prelims at San Antonio?
Oh my goodness. I think it was 84 or 88, something like that. And we went on first in our, in our rotation.
And I'm not saying, but you just have to feel great about what you accomplished. And it would have been interesting if you would have been a closer performance time to some of those other things. So if you ever have a choice, sometimes people say, well, let's just get it over with. You'll notice in the video examples or paintings or videos I shared with you today, nobody picked the first one as the top one. It was either 2 or 3, I believe, right? Yeah. So
yep, correct.
But anyhow, just a little side note. Anything else before we let you go? All right. Well, thanks for having me. I don't know. Do you need to speak to them at all, Mr.? I'll just share the screen back with you here.
Okay. No, we'll see all y'all in class. Everybody say thank you. Give a wave.
Thank you.
Goodbyes.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks, guys.